Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martin Lovers. I'm the Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement. It's a European quarterly and also bi-weekly newsletter, youth group on LinkedIn, over 50,000 members, supply chain professionals all around the world. And I'm also the initiator of the European Supply Chain Startup Contest we are organizing since 2018. So that's me. And we're going to talk about the most promising supply chain startups in Europe. Interesting topic. And next to me, I have an interesting person who is well known in this market, Matthias Bosse. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And Matthias, before you introduce yourself about Prequel Ventures, what you're doing, but maybe something about yourself. So you studied economics and transport and logistics sometimes, and you worked at Dexter. What have you done since, and how did you end up at Prequel Ventures?
Yes, so first, thanks for having me, Martin. Yes, after some years in logistics, I decided to broaden the scope a little bit. Joined different consulting companies, actually two different consulting companies, working in the field of corporate finance advisory and transaction advisory. So helping to make companies make transactions, spin out things, doing big investments. And actually, after a couple of years of consulting, I decided that it's time to get my hands dirty myself. So I joined an early stage tech company as the CFO, getting in touch with a lot of venture capital funds also while raising for that company. And after some years, I decided to switch sides to the dark side of things, as my former colleagues used to say, and become an investor. And after a couple of years of investing, I decided that I would want to focus on the most promising vertical I can think of for the next decades, which is obviously supply chain.
All right. We talk about that right after this. First, some practical things. So this webinar, it will be recorded, or it has been recorded now. And it will be available on YouTube. The slides will be available within 48 hours via our website as a PDF. The audience is on mute. You can see the chat functionality on the right-hand side. It's open now, right now. You can chat like you want, but we will track the Q&A functionality, and that's one level below. So you see the small text bubble. So if you have questions to one of us, please use the Q&A functionality. If these questions are in line of what Matthias and I are discussing at that moment, I will ask his questions immediately. If not, I will reserve the questions until later. Good news, we have 60 minutes. There's a lot to talk about startups and supply chain. And after that, we were meeting in our virtual lounge. So Matthias and I will be sitting at table 1. So basically, if you want to join us right after the hour, we'll be there to ask questions and have a follow-up conversation. So I will put off our camera. We are putting off our camera. So you have the opportunity to enlarge your screen, have a better view on the slides. All right. Before we dig into the supply chain stuff deeply, maybe Matthias, you can explain briefly what Prequel Ventures are doing.
Yes, sure. So as I said, after a couple of years of investing, I decided to double down on supply chain and logistics as a vertical. I did that together with a former colleague of mine, today my co-founder, and we decided to start our own venture fund, which is Prequel Ventures. And what Prequel Ventures does is doing early stage tech investments into supply chain startups. So from sourcing and procurement to last mile delivery and everything that might be relevant in between for moving goods through the value chain and throughout the world. And in the course of setting up Prequel Ventures, we pretty early on decided that we would do a lot of research and also compile this research into insights and reports. So once a year we do a big report on the supply chain tech ecosystem from a startup perspective. Once a year. So this year will be the fifth report, as you can see here in the maybe two small icons. So we're doing this once a year. In the meantime, we've compiled the database of more than 1,100 startups in Europe. So we are focusing on Europe. We have divided them into 16 segments, and in every report we kind of try to lay out the European supply chain ecosystem and state of the ecosystem in terms of which verticals are interesting, where's the funding going, who are the most active investors from a VC perspective. So this year's report is under preparation. So I will come back to that later in the presentation. But that's kind of a bit of the foundation for us to make our investment decisions and also kind of understand the key trends in this industry.
Yeah, and Matthias has been part of our jury of our supply chain startup contest in the past few years, so that's why we know each other quite well. And Supply Chain Media also has a lot of research done since 2018. So we have 10 segments in supply chain. We'll get to that later on. And I think we say startups are a maximum of 5 years old. Beyond 5 years, they should be on their own and they should be established. That's our definition for our startup. And then beyond, there is also some division. Are you a startup or a scale-up, depending on your funding? We get to that point later. But so we have similar research done like Prequel Venture has done. But first, what I always do when I start this kind of webinar, this is what the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are talking about, to see, to test the waters, and later on we get deeper into supply chain. So over here you see these are the phrases CEOs and CFOs are using during their quarterly earning calls, and these are CEOs, CFOs of Fortune 500 companies. On the right side, you see the phrases, the words most mentioned, and the higher up you see, that's also trending. So that's it. So on the right hand side, you see AI, tariffs, and supply chain. Supply chain has been there since start of COVID. Further to the left, you see AI bubble and AI tools. And upper left, you see blue Nexperia. People in supply chain know, the Dutch company, or Dutch now Chinese company Nexperia, created the whole bullwhip and shortages in chips for the automotive. So German automotive is crying out loud that the Dutch minister created an Nexperia bullwhip, and now they don't have any shortage. They have shortages in chips for their automotive manufacturing. Matthias, if you look at this, what are the things that resonates in your field?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the topic of AI and everything becomes agentic AI and AI agents in every shape and form is obviously also the most prominent topic in VC. I mean, some of my VC colleagues go as far as investing in nothing that doesn't come along as AI first, etc. So as you can imagine, all the pitch decks and all the requests we get as of today, everyone has AI on its name and product. That's super important, and to a certain extent, this is certainly true, right? So AI does change a lot. But compared to booms from the past, like blockchain or visibility or whatever, so it's still in technique, right? That's aiming to make things better, and the overall product should be a little bit more than just AI. It's very dependent on the use case, obviously, but so everything becoming in AI and agentic is for sure the one of the most important topics we talked about in 2025 and will continue to talk about in 2026. Looking at tariffs and all the compliance things and trade policy and trade wars, etc. I mean, that's also super interesting and super relevant from our perspective, because we also saw a lot of startups going after these topics, and also some of our portfolio companies are dealing with these questions. So the whole question of geopolitics and the implications on the economy and trade, that's obviously something that's super relevant for a lot of companies. And whenever there are problems in the world and troubles and hypes, those also reflect then in smart founders going after these areas with cool products, and also causing a little bit of hype in VC. Every now and then we try not to buy the hype, but obviously in the VC industry, so it's a lot of hype every now and then.
I was wondering, do you see the pitch deck also improving, maybe generated by Gen AIs?
Yeah, so sometimes it's not too easy to judge what made the pitch deck look better, but definitely the quality of pitch decks and also the quality of outreaches and preparation and documents available in the data room, etc. So it's definitely increasing. I think from some documents you can definitely tell that this was AI generated. But there's nothing wrong with this, right? Because obviously AI also does a good job in summarizing and creating some of these documents, pictures, and presentations. Still, some documents look more sophisticated than they might be.
Yeah. All right. Maybe you can have a look back since you started with pre-seed and also pre-co ventures, where the money is going.
Yeah. So actually, yeah, sure. And actually, this slide summarizes a bit the development over the last decade. The 2025 numbers are not ready yet because they're part of the most recent report, as briefly mentioned. But and also our research kind of started way before we even started pre-co ventures. And as you can see here, that's summarizing a bit of the total amount of money that was invested into supply chain related startups. So there was kind of a first wave or a wave that doesn't look big but is big from 2014 to 2019, which also showed increasing attention investors spend to supply chain related startups. So there was really strong growth in that, and some of the more familiar names like the Zenders and the Fortress, etc. of this world started in this time and were kind of driving this or riding this wave. Then we had a super small setback when COVID started. But I mean, that lasted for, I don't know, some months, if at all. And as you can see, then in 2021 and 2022, things really went crazy because especially in the COVID years, there was a lot of investment, also later stage investment into things like visibility, like fulfillment, like last mile delivery, like shipping and transportation. Then 2022 kind of brought everything back to normal, I would say. But still, if you compare 2023 and 2024 to 2019 and 20, so it's still kind of on this level. And 2025 will most probably actually be a bit bigger. So the COVID years might be really an exemption, right? So low interest rate, everyone shopping from home, etc. So supply chains under pressure. So big investments being done in this time. So since then, interest rates rose, the Ukraine war, etc. All the problems we are talking about every day, which has not only in supply chain but in venture in general, I would say, cut back investments. And I think it's to a certain degree it's good because so it's more about quality, it's more about real business, a bit more. But as I said, VC is coming in waves, and 2021 and 2022 was definitely a big wave, cut back now in 2023, 2024. Now we see a slight uptrend, and I would say this is kind of a healthy setback.
So two questions from my side. I do know that I think it was 21 or 22 that Sweep, the French company on sustainability ESG software, raised 100 million euros. So that was amazing. I think the next one in that category raised 30 or 40 million euros. So that's a huge chunk. So is it, did that surprise you? Because sustainability, might be a bit fading. So it wasn't also one of the triggers you didn't mention. You mentioned visibility last mile, but you didn't mention sustainability.
Yeah, sure. So visibility, sustainability, and I think we will come to that on one of the other slides as well. I mean, in these years, so 2020, 21, 2022, this was definitely a driver, and there are some other kind of startups that also raised big money in that time, like the Pre-Waves and the EcoVadis and Integrity Next of this world. And this was definitely, and still is to a certain degree, I would say a driver, totally driven by regulation, right? So the EU Green Deal and all the associated regulations, but also in other jurisdictions, there were kind of supply chain due diligence laws. Definitely this was one of the drivers in this time, which most recently went off the agenda to a certain degree, I would say. So a lot of headwinds for sustainability startups, and also a bit of consolidation, because also in this time, so many kind of CO2 footprint calculating startups were founded and trying to sell their product. So definitely one of the super important categories, as we will see later also. And one of the drivers, but I think the even bigger rounds went into other things like digital freight forwarding, e-fulfillment, etc.
Yeah, if you look, well, you know, there was a tailwind. So in the green one, you know, potential customer to do pilot. That's what they're looking after. Then you had the problem of by then, to attract new people. So at that time, in those peak days, they had some troubles attracting new people. Things have changed now. So every year when we do our own survey among supply chain startups, we ask these questions about their commercial pipeline. What is green? What is good and what is not good? So in 2022, you know, tailwind. The only thing negative was to attract new people, new employees. So the rest was all green. 2023, you saw that, you know, they had the hard time. They were not visible in their opinion. There was a lack of partnering with industry partners, implementation partners. Still, they had a hard time attracting new people, and they had some hard times attracting new funding. If you look at it now, you follow the money. So how things are changing, and what do you think is attractive? You mentioned the segments.
Yeah, no, I mean that's more or less what we already started to discuss, right? So if you look at these three bars here, they're comparing the most relevant segments into the investment went from 14 to 19, 2021, and then 20 to 2024. And on the very left, you can see, as I said, right? So that's kind of the investment going into kind of fulfillment startups, core logistics function, last mile delivery, and less so in other segments of supply chain. And we see this always as a kind of first wave of investment that really went into the core logistics, more kind of functions, which were also maybe easier to digitize. So they were very analog and very old school, and then some digital players came up. First of all, in the first step, maybe only with more digital front ends, and then trying to develop more of the backend technology over time. But that was when all of the digital freight forwarding companies also came into existence and absorbed huge amounts of investment. In the pandemic, you then also shift kind of started also to other areas of supply chain. We mentioned sustainability and compliance due to regulation. A lot of investment went into supply chain visibility. Kind of all the questions and problems resulting from disrupted supply chains, not knowing where your shipment is and not knowing if your supplier is still active, etc. So those attracted a lot more investment, which is also often to the procurement function, because that's obviously where it all starts for a lot of companies in their procurement departments. So moving away from these more traditional logistics functions, more into other areas of supply chain. And then on the very right, 2022 and later, so you can see that it's more evenly distributed, and all the other kind of all the mentioned segments are still relevant, but less so dominated by logistics and fulfillment and last mile delivery, but also kind of bringing into play other components and sustainability, to come back to that topic, and compliance, which from our perspective also includes things like trade and customs, became much more relevant. which from our perspective is also to a certain extent saying that the topics have become more diverse. Investment is flowing into all different kinds of supply chain aspects. The topic of supply chain is also becoming more relevant for a lot of more investors. So not only us as a very focused fund, but also more of the generalistic funds in the meantime then have people and teams dealing with supply chain questions. And companies also putting that on their agenda, right? So a lot of companies are trying to revamp their supply chain tech stack and making their supply chains more agile, more resilient, which is good from our perspective.
So if you're looking back, during 2018-19, there was a lot of investment and a lot of interest in freight forwarding, freight matching, and that kind of stuff. In the ocean freight forwarding, you have Freight Hub, and you have containers, Shipamax, and you had road freight matching like Everroad, OnTruck, InstaFreight, FreightLink, Sender. In the last mile, you had 7 Senders and Urbans. Are you still tracking down what happened to them, and if they're still around? What is your take on those big ones?
Yeah, so I mean, especially the big one. So we monitor them to a certain extent. When they come too mature, they're not interesting for us as an investment target, because we always invest into kind of pre-seed or seed stage companies. So rather the early stage companies, but still we try to follow these companies to understand what's going on in the industry, and especially the ones you mentioned. I mean, as with all the segments that are maturing over time, there's a bit of a shakeout, and there's a bit of consolidation. Sender and Everroad, InstaFreight went bust. Some of the fulfillment companies went bust. I mean, to a certain extent, it's normal, I would say, but on the other end, it's also kind of a bit of a learning curve also for venture investors, because let's stick with the example of digital freight forwarding companies, right? So for sure they can make things better. They can try to kind of make processes more efficient and also bring up operating margins within their businesses. Still, it's a freight forwarding business, right? And it's not totally changing the game.
No.
And I think to a certain extent they have learned it. They have learned it the hard way, that they are not changing the underlying fundamentals of this industry, right? By doing what they do, and that obviously also caused some of them to run out of money and not making the shift into capital efficient businesses.
No, I can imagine. It's not of interest for you to target, but maybe you can follow it and you see, we made the right choices and not jumping on that wagon, that kind of stuff, So we had the right vision, like you mentioned, that there's no underlying new business model, and that's why it failed. Sure,
we do, and we are in regular talks with some of the founders of these companies. Obviously, it's always good to see where you haven't done mistakes. On the other hand, it's always a bit of a hindsight bias, right? We went investing with Prequel Ventures in 2014 or 15. So in that sense, it's still interesting to see, and also first of all, interesting to see how they cope with these problems and what they do to still make it on their journey. But it also tells you that it's better to, from our perspective, it's always better to have an investment focus and know the industry you are active in, because I think some of the bets we wouldn't have made, because we would not have been convinced that what these companies do totally changes the underlying economics, and that's still what counts in the long run, right?
Yeah, of course. If you look at our overview, so here's an overview of some names you mentioned. I have to update it, but quite a few are gone. So this is our overview we published in 2018. So you mentioned that quite a few are not around anymore. So that's what we mentioned. Some are still around. Schipul is still around. SendCloud is still around. TradeCloud. So that it's good to see which one are still around. So we get back, because also the segments, we have 10 segments, they evolve and they change over time. So this is a a view on 2018, what we published by then. This is on the right side. You mentioned more diverse. It's interesting to see how detailed you are looking at this market and the different kind of startups funding.
Yeah. So I mean, I think so. This is kind of summarizing, right? So over the last 10 years, or over these 10 years from 14 to 2024, so in which segments were the most of the startups being founded, right? So topic wise, and that's the whole 10 years, right? We can also always debate how to slice and dice the data and where one segments end and where the other begins. That's obviously also a bit of overlap every now and then in the solutions these companies are developing. But I think the topic is so the result in the message is still clear. So there's still a big number being founded each year. It's in all segments of supply chain. So supply chain as a function is kind of is getting attention from founders and investors. And some segments obviously are bigger than others, also reflecting a bit of the real business, real world, so to say. But in that sense, you can see that also really significant percentages of companies are not only dealing with freight forwarding and core logistics functions, but also with segments we mentioned earlier already, right? So sustainability, visibility, fulfillment, procurement, warehousing stuff, manufacturing, which we count to a certain degree also into supply chain, as long as it's kind of steering and coordinating manufacturing tasks. So it's good. It's really good to see that the founding activity is still high, that also serial founders, which have done other startups before, now deal with supply chain topics and functions. That's also a bit of a fact reflecting that supply chain as a function has grown a lot in importance within the companies, right? And it's not only kind of a pure cost center approach anymore, but it's rather really a core strategic function in many companies.
Yeah. So, we get a lot of entries for our supply chain startup contest every year. And the better ones are really focusing on a real supply chain problem and not saying we can solve any problem. So basically, they focus on certain areas mentioned here. How do you create supply chain visibility, and what have they done differently than it's existing right now? So that's also, and we talk about later how supply chain startups can distinguish and should distinguish themselves. So that's for later, also for the startup contest, that is of importance. Here you have an overview of what's trending lately.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, a bit of repeating myself here on what we said earlier. That's kind of the question. So which were the most important segments in different times. Here, not according to the money invested, but rather to the companies founded. Still reflecting of what we just said several times already. So freight and shipping kind of went down in importance, so less companies being founded in these different time periods. Sustainability and compliance rising a lot, procurement rising a lot, manufacturing, that was quite surprising for ourselves as well. Over the last couple of years became more and more important, and also in this year, or 2025 and beginning of this year, there's a lot of stuff going on in with regard to manufacturing. So it's just to a certain extent, I would say, reflecting the overall trends and topics and problems of the world, where there are severe problems, founders are attracted to build smart solutions, and that's good and interesting to see.
So regarding manufacturing, I see production planning and production scaling. It's quite hot, and I think people in supply chain and manufacturing know scheduling problems, and most of the time it's not being done in your ERP environment, so you need some extra add-ons to that, and that's the field. I think it's growing rapidly. This is our startup maturity matrix of last year. So basically, from left to right, you see the supplier side up to the consumer side on the right. You see from down below, moving up, it's from startup to scale up. So we made a division. If you are funded with more than 200 million, for 2 million raised capital, you're becoming a scale up. And you see different areas. So we have slightly different segmentation than pre-cool ventures. So we on the left, you see the sourcing and supplier compliance. So they're looking at the suppliers, maybe tier 1, tier 2 and up, and get an insight in all of that. Sometimes also it's about, sustainable sourcing. That's also in there. In the green area, you see carbon accounting. Like I mentioned, Sweep has raised 100 million. CarbMe, I think 30 or 40 million, so a lot. So there's a huge bunch of startups over there. I get to a more detailed view over there. So we have even dissected that part. Traceability is in there. Third one on the left, inventory and visibility and optimization. That's more like inventory management and that kind of stuff. But it's also reaching out to your network. Where's my inventory at suppliers, in my own warehouses, manufacturing sites. Asset tracking, that has been big, but it's fading away in a similar way like freight forwarding. And then in the blue one, you see all kind of planning solutions, supply chain, S&OP, that kind of stuff, and that's quite hot. There's a typo Horizon, the Belgian one, fourth down below. So you see a lot of traction over there, and I think that's very important to mention. More going to the right, visibility in transport, so that's downstream or up to the delivery part. And we have combined ocean, rail, and road freight matching, because nowadays they combine all kind of functionality of modality, not only road but also rail, air and sea, last mile, and totally on the right, returns management. So that's also something we have picked up. And now, as we speak, we're quite busy to get the last data for our upcoming maturity matrix. So we are, in parallel, like Pre-Cool Ventures is doing with their tech studies. If you look at this, Matthias, what are you looking at from a venture perspective?
Yeah, so first of all, this perfectly also kind of illustrates a lot of names referring to what we said earlier, right? In the different fields, rising or lowering in importance. In terms of what we see for us as the most relevant points, in some of these companies you are mentioning here, we are invested as well, because we think that these things are relevant. Demand planning and forecasting, and also the question of the inventory visibility and optimization. To a certain extent, that every now and then goes together, and this is also something we see a lot of potential in, because that's also where a huge business case for a lot of companies is, right? So being more efficient with their inventories, understanding what they have on inventory, where to use it, and maybe in other products or in other sites of the same company. Among others, we have done an investment into Resourcely, which is exactly dealing with this question. This is one of the super interesting verticals. As I said earlier, we're not trying to buy the hype, and I really mean it, but still all the overarching topic for us going forward in many aspects is automation in every shape and form, which is not only moving goods physically and automating it with robotic solutions, but also automating a lot of these function and tasks, and obviously always using kind of AI-driven systems. But the technique is becoming so good that a lot of these functions we are also mentioning here can be much easier fulfilled with smart solutions based on software, which is then at least partially powered by AI. And this is the overarching topic we see with a lot of companies. It's not always easy, because these companies are still looking for immediate kind of returns, or at least short-term benefits, and require a strong use case. But the question of automation is so relevant in all aspects of supply chain that we think this is one of the overarching themes we would like to follow in the next years.
Yes. And when I talk to supply chain executives, mid-sized companies, multinationals, they are, intrigued, and they are inspired and interested in these kind of startups. What's new? What's happening? Because all these tools are AI native, I would say. All of them have some sort of AI in it. They are founded in the cloud, etc. So that's one thing. Another thing, what I experienced lately is, the bigger companies, or also mid-sized companies, who have a data layer internally. So they have their ERP layer, and on top of that, they have some sort of data layer to connect all the other supply chain software types. Call it WMS, TMS, SNOP, digital twins, and you name it. So what I experience right now lately, that because of the easiness to implement, if you have a data lake, it's quite easy to connect to the cloud and get it working. And now with the user interfaces getting better and better, more intuitive, and especially the startups, they want to have a cool application that look nice, not like horrible, Excel on steroids like we used to know. So that's changing. And even the bigger multinationals who are dealing mostly with the Blue Yonders and the O9 and the Connexus and the likes, they are looking at smaller applications, maybe for smaller business units or entities. So I expect that the bigger ones are not always the winners anymore. Maybe they will buy startups, but I think the startups, they can be agile, they can be easy to implement. We don't want to implement software taking years, rather months or weeks. So that's something. There's a whole new world out there, even for the bigger companies, who already have invested a lot in ERP and all kind of heavy SNOP rollouts globally. I do see interest also from that companies. They are looking at agile implementations, lean and mean. So that's my take. If you go on, we created the ESG IT supermap for the second time. So basically, you saw in sustainability a whole new category of supply chain software. Basically, they were all startup and scale-ups. But what you see lately, and on the right, you see my conclusions written in an article last fall, is that the market of carbon management software is under pressure because of the CSRD regulation has been postponed, more lenient, etc. Then again, sustainability, it is not clear defined. So like you have ERP, WMS, TMS, SNP, that kind of software, there are no acronyms yet. So I try to find them, but even these vendors are creating their own acronyms. So now corporate carbon footprint, CCF, seems to be some sort of a standard acronym for some sort. Scope 3 calculation is more well defined. Carbon insetting is also there. Now you see what we used to call supply chain traceability is now called digital product passport. And sometimes you have a sustainability visibility platform to connect this data. So these 5 specified supply chain software types are in there. But you see now new companies or existing companies coming in this new field. So like Tasty Square, Transporion, and Uber Freight are developing their own sustainability functionality. Sometimes they acquire a software like Blue Yonder. They bought Pledge, I think last year or year before. So you see this whole market will consolidate, and it's under pressure. So Matthias, is it something, a field you are looking at strongly or not?
Yeah, so we think this is still relevant for the time being. I would say we see that it's more difficult for these companies to make their way to the market and also kind of generate the growth they need, because as you said, so sustainability, given the postponement in regulation and the more harsh economic situation, it's not disappearing and it's not totally off the agenda, but to a certain extent, I would say it's deprioritized, so it's not so prominent as it has been over the last years. So definitely, sales cycles are extending. The urgency of a lot of these companies is at least lowered. So I think we still look at this segment. For the time being, I would say it's not the most important one for us. And as you rightly said, I mean, the longer these topics are around, the more the incumbents and established companies kind of come up with these kind of solutions or try to integrate something into their product offerings. Ideally, they buy some of these startups, but they also develop their own stuff and try to integrate it into their products. And then obviously it's also for a lot of companies easier to maybe use this solution because it's already within their original kind of software applications. But so we think it's still relevant in the long term. It might be a difficult period for these startups.
Yeah, well, I do believe the digital product passport, that will be a hotter topic, because we see a scarcity on raw materials and parts. That's and also the consumer in the end demands visibility of where are my products coming from, what are the components in it. So I do expect that a digital product passport is something companies in manufacturing need to develop for their customers, to have insights, how they build their products. So that's one thing what I would suggest, that the digital product passport, DPP, might be of interest. Briefly, 2024, there was positivism. So basically, the lights were green. So all the supply chain we surveyed were, positive about their visibility, their commercial pipeline, etc. We will check, how they are looking at their market right now. So we're busy with all that. What we also did, and that might be of importance also for startups, but we did a survey last fall among 81 senior supply chain executives in Europe. So they are the ones working for bigger multinationals and in manufacturing, wholesale, and retail. And we asked them, what are they interested in? What are they looking for? Yes, AI was number one. They want AI tooling to solve their problems. But we asked them, where do you want to apply AI? So end-to-end control towers, that's still a bit vague. Maybe you can apply AI in there, but the other ones, AI in production and supply planning. So that's something also in manufacturing, I think Matthias is calling. Machine learning and forecasting, that's hot. And now the phrase digital supply chain twins is resurfacing after a few years. AI in maintenance is in need, but also AI now, and maybe that they're all already applying these chatbots in customer service. So that's what I see. Matthias, if we look at this, is it also so your take that you're looking at this kind of needs to think, which one are solved by certain startups?
Yeah. So sure. So I think to a certain extent, so I mean the AI applications, I think from our perspective might be a bit broader. So I mean definitely they are relevant for forecasting, planning, production. That's something I also found interesting and good to see it here again. I mean that's something that's on our list and on our radar in production and manufacturing, that AI plays a bigger and bigger role there. The digital twin part, that's also interesting. As you said, there was a big wave, I would say, of digital twin kind of solutions a couple of years ago, and not many of them really made it in the sense of becoming big companies. So most of them are still around doing kind of doing business. but not grew as expected. And I think to a certain extent, digital twin. So it sounds very mighty, but in some applications, a digital twin of what you are trying to then work on with AI is not super big. And that's something that we kind of find built in many, or kind of built in some solutions, because they need this digital twin to work on AI on this and then derive some decisions of it. So that's definitely having a bit of a revival, I would say. But the overall question, where to deploy AI, I mean, that are only the most relevant points here, I would say. But I think that's much even broader, I would say, than this year.
Yeah, okay, but this is what they mentioned. And by the way,
Yeah, sure.
Heineken has already developed a chatbot with they recorded all the things, the failures, etc., for machines, and basically all around the world, and they put it in a chatbot. So basically, the operator could ask, "This is happening to my machine. Can you help me out?" And that's working out fine. So basically, they have a chatbot for on machine level. So that's what they're using already, and rightly so. Digital twin, you can have it on different level, on machine level, warehouse level, factory level, or network level. So that's also a matter of definition.
Yeah, totally agree. And I mean that's one of the, if I may add this. So
Yeah.
this is one of the first, and so I don't want to call it easy, but maybe one of the easiest use cases, and also one of the big advantages of AI, that it's totally lowers the hurdle to interact with your data, right, and with your information in the company, without being super educated in business intelligence and kind of working with data, or even coding. It's making it so easy for everyone in the company to interact with these data, not even to really make decisions and trigger actions, but rather to understand what's going on and still do the work by a human, but make it much more easier and much more accessible for everyone in the company.
Yeah. So this is a summary of another company who is doing some research on startups, Stardust Insights. They have created this kind of overview. So they think this is the top 9 supply chain trends and innovation in 2025. They mentioned some names. First of all, they mentioned 9 segments, and they mentioned some names they think are of interest. What do you think? Is it the way you should pitch the things you're seeing and the startups you are researching? Or?
No. I mean, you and I, we talked about a slide earlier, right? So from my perspective, it's a bit of a catch-all slide here in our topics, right? Because if we would have looked back some years, those would be most probably very similar, these trends. And if we look at this slide in a year from now, it's most likely the same. But I would say I would like to pick two aspects here from this one where we would agree in terms of whether this is a super relevant trend. I would pick up on flexible supply chains. So we always call it agile supply chains, and I think it's not enough anymore just to know your supply chain and kind of have visibility on it, etc. So the end goal is actually to be really agile, to be able to react to different events and shocks, etc. So agility is kind of the goal here, and that's also with an increasing degree of autonomy, right? So that's something I'm missing here a little bit. I mean, under the AI umbrella, I think it's not only being more efficient and things being done by the AI rather than by human, but it's also a bit more of autonomous decisions. And I mean, that's where supply chain, from our perspective, is going to becoming more like an autonomous, agile thing that is kind of, to a certain extent, self-reacting to a lot of events in your supply chain and making the right decisions. For the time being, obviously, always human controlled, but with an increasing degree of autonomy. And one more thing I would like to mention, which we also find very interesting, but haven't done any investments in the space. We always discussed about resilience and supply chain disruptions over the last couple of years, caused by geopolitics, natural disaster, wars, etc. But one of the aspects that is still coming a bit short is the question of cybersecurity in terms of supply chain. And I would say this is definitely one of the, so cybersecurity is a big trend in general, but also within the function of supply chain. I think this will become much more relevant over the next years.
Yeah, I know. Marks and Spencers in the UK had a huge cybersecurity breach, leading to all kind of supply chain disruptions in their field, and I think also Land Rover also hit by cyber attacks last year. Mainly, I think it was their tier 2 supplier being hacked. So they had to shut down factories, and Marks and Spencer couldn't deliver, etc. So that field is hot because it could be major in that field. And you talked about resilience. I do believe you're right. Autonomous. We talk about AI agents, and we're starting to feel that companies are testing AI agents one-on-one for transport management or procurement. I don't see AI agents talk to each other and make decisions yet. So first, you get some recommendation from an AI agent on transport, and you say yes, book it, etc. And then maybe you can say, okay, if this, do it directly. If not, show me a suggestion, recommendation, and I will say yes or no. But AI agent talking to each other, we're not there yet. But in the end, I think we're heading that way.
Agree.
Here, Gen AI is also there. So what's your take here?
Yeah, so I mean I think we can make it real short, because that's kind of when we ask the companies to also classify their tech within their product. Then obviously a big portion of it is software, and an increasing share is AI. That's from last year. If we would have the data from this year already, then most probably the AI bar would be much bigger. And that's so it's still a huge portion of what we invest in, and also what is being founded is driven by software and coding and AI. But it's also interesting to note that hardware, which was long time kind of being seen very critically by a lot of venture investors, is playing a bigger role in the last months. Because especially when it comes to moving around physical goods and robotics, also humanoid robot and manufacturing, then the question of hardware becomes relevant again, and we would expect to see more investment going into hardware over the next years.
Yeah. So you mentioned to wrap up, your side. You're busy with your supply chain tech report that's coming out in the next few months. So what do you expect as a highlight of this report?
Yes, so this year's report will be kind of a bit different than the last ones, because on the one hand we are still monitoring and kind of analyzing the European supply chain tech ecosystem, so startups, investments, etc. But also with a more kind of big analysis of our partner Oliver Wyman on the corporate view, where they kind of see problems and what they see for the future, and maybe to give a bit of a preview on the startups. I mean, that was really interesting to see the whole question of resilience and agility. So that's still on, and companies are looking for solutions. But they're looking for solutions that really deliver relatively immediately value and have a strong business case, right? So it's not resilience at all costs. It's rather being cost discipline, very good business cases, immediate returns, really addressing their most prominent problems and delivering solutions on that. AI obviously is on everyone's agenda, very, very high. The big problem all of these not all, but a lot of these companies are facing is not that there are not enough startups or smart solutions based on AI out there, but and also a lot of these startups have pilot pilot projects with a lot of companies and make first revenues, etc., etc. But the rollout of these solutions is not so easy, and a lot of startups are hitting kind of a glass ceiling because their companies, their customers, the companies, are not always ready to roll out these solutions because of data quality and data availability within these companies. That's kind of one of the biggest hurdles in implementing these solutions, that the underlying data is not clean, is not good enough. That's still a huge task for corporates to lay the foundations on which AI then works.
I know, but I have questions. Well, I had conversations last few weeks with tech companies, and they are showing that they are able to do data cleansing in an amazing way. So technology is evolving very rapidly. So basically, data cleansing of supply chain data to use for planning and resilience and scenario is improving rapidly. So I think things will change rapidly, and yes, clean data, master data is very important. But I also see that there are more and more tech companies who are supplying tools to enhance your data, to improve it, to cleanse it, to check if lead times are still up to date, etc. So I do expect in this year that will change a lot, and that will have an impact for a lot of companies to see, okay, where can we apply these tools and maybe clean our data, even writing back in our ERP system, etc.
Yeah, agree.
So two slides, and then we have some questions. We are busy doing our research for the Maturity Matrix 2026. We'll be published in the upcoming magazines, Supply Chain Magazine and Supply Chain Movement. And we are also busy right after that to gather contestants for our yearly European supply chain contest. So basically, I do see that there are some startup founders in the audience here today. If you are founded in 2021 or a later year, you're able to join or to participate in the contest. Why should you join? Basically, if you are a finalist, you're able to pitch in front of a huge audience of supply chain practitioners, hopefully wanting to have such a new kind of tool you have developed. Basically, you will get also a marketing campaign through our channel. So we have put a lot of startups on the map. So previous winners were Sea Bamboo, Floaty, and some more. So a Windle is also a winner. So we put them on the map based on that they were winning our contest. So basically, what are we looking at if we have the finalists? So before that, so we get a lot of entries. We go through their entry forms. We go through the propositions. So basically, these are the 4 criteria we are looking at. So the commercial opportunity. Is there a market for this startup? Basically, we have a discussion among the jury members. Do you think they are still around in 5 years' time? So is it a good thing to try out and have a demo or an implementation with the startup? Also, is there a commercial opportunity? That's our thing. The level of innovation, is it really new? So we see a lot of startup, they come up with some things and they think they are unique, but lo and behold, I see similar entries coming in. So did you know that somewhere in Estonia there's a similar kind of startup working on that same kind of problem? So is there a level of innovation? The practical applicability, so how easy can you implement? And the final part is the clearness of the message, that storytelling. Do they have a clean cut story? Because you have 3 minutes to pitch during our Innovate event. Do you have a clear message? Do you present the problem as a whole clear? Matthias, thanks for now. Questions. So we have still 2 minutes. So if there might be questions from the audience, now is the time to ask these questions. If not, so what is your thinking? You talked about resilience. Do you expect new startups, or do you think that they are still around and you see it in the current field of startups, or they might pivot in some sort of area?
I'm not sure if I got the question. I mean, a pivot is always an option for an early stage startup. So when it comes to resilience, I think there's still a lot of room for startups to start new things, right? So I mean, it all started with getting more insights, having more visibility, not only kind of real-time visibility in the sense of where's my shipment, but also with a lot of more, let's call it supply chain intelligence. So understanding your own supply chain better, and all the tiers in it, etc., including the sustainability and compliance things that need to be covered within these supply chains. But the whole question is then obviously also how to react to these events, right? And how to trigger certain actions within your company, which then also affect many of your customers, etc. And I think there is still a lot that can be done, I would say.
So my observation, so I talked to a lot of established software vendors, but also newcomers, etc. What I do see, that supply chain executives don't like Excel spreadsheets. They would rather have other kind of user interfaces. So I see, I know a company who have created their own dashboard with bubble charts. So basically, if I push here, I squeeze this bubble, some other bubbles will be bigger. So inventory, working capital, etc. So I would recommend startups, think differently, visually, look at maps. Where are my risk? Where is my inventory? Not in Excel, but where should I push forward, and that kind of thing. So I think that the visualization and user interfaces will be important, a differentiator for startups, and knowing what Gemini, Claude, and can do nowadays. I hope and expect that we will see more other intuitive, more user-friendly interfaces. All right. So maybe all the questions are answered. If you have some more things to discuss with us, we will be sitting there in our virtual lounge right after this. Some links. So basically, you can download our maturity matrix. In 2 months, there will be the 2026 update. Same to your tech report, I'd expect in the next 2 months, Matthias. So for now, I'd like to thank you, Matthias. Thank you for joining.
Yep, thanks for having me.
And thank you watching live or either the recording. So I hope you like it. And next week we have an amazing expert. That's Magnus Lindqvist. He's a very well-known futurologist. And next week we're going to talk about supply chain predictions, what will be happening in 2026 and beyond. So that's for next week. For now, I'd like to thank you, and maybe I see you next week in the webinar, or maybe I see you in the virtual lounge right after this. Thanks for now, and bye-bye.